There's a lot of talk about healing the world, trying to fix everything out there.
We tend to just reinforce the trauma pathways in our nervous system.
I've often wondered why there was so much melancholy throughout my life. I have been melancholic from the time I was a child, before I could even remember.
It must get instilled in our bodies when we're in the womb, as we're forming.
If we are birthing babies, if we're bringing new ones into the world, and we're not paying attention to what we are casting upon them, then we are just continuing to create a wounded world.
It's something that profoundly affects us all, and yet we're not aware of it. We don't even think about it.
And the profound need for this discussion to happen for so many.
The first step in healing is awareness.
Our healing journey is not just an individual process or limited to the present. Awakening requires awareness, a return to the stillness we emerged from, and space to listen.
Welcome. You have entered the realm of 1111 Talk Radio. Your host is SIMRAN. It's time to discover your own language with the universe. Empower yourself. Broaden your mind. Open your heart. Here's your host, SIMRAN.
Humans naturally fear the dark. The unknown lingers there, threatening danger. This unknown may include aspects of ourselves that we are not consciously familiar with. Prenatal development is perhaps appropriate for this powerful expression of the mystery of how life comes to be. Evidently, consciousness, learning, intelligence, and memory are not confined to the brain and nervous system, and may not even require a physical body. This can explain memories from before you had a brain, or were even conceived. This is from the book The Prenatal Shadow, written by Cherionna Menzam-Sills. Dr. Cherionna Menzam-Sills is a somatic pre- and perinatal therapist, Continuum somatic inquiry teacher, and biodynamic craniosacral therapist with a doctorate in prenatal and perinatal psychology. You can find out more at birthingyourlife.org. Welcome, Cherionna.
Thank you, Simran. It's already a pleasure to be here. I feel very touched by your introduction. Sounds like you've lived what I wrote about.
It really was a wonderful, intimate experience going through your book, and such a valuable one to know about. Start with what pre and perinatal means so that anyone that's not familiar with those terms can have an understanding of what this discussion is really about, and how we, as newborns, as those in the womb, are actually sentient and feeling everything that is happening during those stages of our incarnation.
So first of all, pre and perinatal. Pre is before, and peri means around. So prenatal is before birth. Perinatal is around the time of birth. Sometimes it's considered for maybe a year after birth because the baby and mother are so connected. It's as if the baby is still gestating. You know, we humans have big heads. They say we're born a year prematurely compared to other animals that usually can walk within minutes or hours of birth. It takes us a year. It's interesting that would be the first question because most people don't know what that means. And I've spent many years diving into that and explaining that. To me, that's part of the shadow, something that profoundly affects us all. And yet we're not aware of it. We don't even think about it. You know, we think about prenatal generally as a time when a baby is growing their physical body. But of course, they're also developing their psyche. We now know that babies are very aware. I did my Ph.D. in pre- and perinatal psychology in the 90s. At that time, I was really fascinated to see how psychologists, people interested in early learning and consciousness, were learning how to adjust their research to be more appropriate for little ones who didn't have verbal language. where it used to be believed that children couldn't remember anything until they could speak because we didn't know how to understand them. More and more, the researchers were understanding that toddlers, little ones before they could speak, were clearly learning and remembering. We have more and more evidence that that's happening earlier and earlier, even before birth, even before the nervous system develops. So we tend to think that memory has to do with the brain and the nervous system. And of course it does, but it's not limited to that. And the way I like to think about that, and I find it helpful, is to think about cells. We start out as a unicellular organism. When the sperm and the egg come together, it's called a zygote. And it actually is an organism, perfectly adapted to its environment at the time. First of all, the egg and the sperm have had awareness. They couldn't find each other without some awareness. They have a way to send messages and receive those messages from each other. They're communicating so that they find each other and they come together. Life absolutely depends on that. And once they come together and form this new organism, that organism is a cell, and cells are very responsive to their environment. If a unicellular organism is in solution, and a scientist takes some toxin and puts a drop or some drops into the solution, that organism will respond to it, react to it by contracting. That's awareness. That's a sensitivity. And every cell has that ability. We wouldn't have an immune system if our immune cells weren't capable of recognizing dangerous things that come in to the body and responding to them, learning about their shape and creating receptors for them so that if they come in again, the organism can respond. And that includes humans. But that's happening at a cellular level. That's cellular awareness. So we don't need a nervous system to have learning and awareness. And we know that little ones from the very beginning are having experiences that profoundly affect them. They can't talk about it because they don't have words. But these memories are what we call implicit, which means that they're in the body, they're in the emotions. Because they don't tend to be acknowledged in our modern world, they get acted out. So we tend to go into relationships or perceive potential relationships influenced by how we experienced, for example, our mother when we were in the womb or at birth.
My greatest awareness has been in the darkness, in moving through the shadows. The beginnings that we come from would be the void. They would be the darkness. They would be those places. So the awareness that you speak of course, would take place. But yet, being open consciousness, it's very clear in my own experience and through my own work that this soaking up of the environment also takes place so that we begin to have a sense of who and what we believe we are. And so a lot of my exploration throughout life has been around what is this thing called karma, and then shadow, and then trauma, and how are all these things really echoes from an originating point? The space that is prenatal and perinatal, that's really then the space that all of the echoes ripple out from, rather than simply early childhood wounds or the things that happen. It actually begins much earlier, yes?
Absolutely. And, some people believe it begins even before conception. And so we can look at the sperm and the egg coming together, but there seems to be a third something that comes in. Maybe a somebody that comes in, a being, an essence, a soul, spirit, whatever you call it. It's interesting you mentioned karma because I think this was even before I got into pre and perinatal psychology. I was into past life experiences. And it occurred to me that when we bring karma into this life, whatever we're bringing into this life, it must get instilled in our psyche and in our bodies when we're in the womb, that early as we're forming. That's part of what I see as being the environment that little ones in the womb are adapting to. So part of it is the collective awareness, the cultural awareness, and ancestral influences, and quite possibly past life influences or other parallel lives. There's other realities that seem to be affecting us, our experience of spirit, of source. And I include all of that in what I call our original embryological potential. So what goes into shadow isn't acknowledged, isn't just what people often think of as going into shadow as, the bad things, the difficult feelings, or the things I can't accept about myself or believe others won't accept about me because I'm taught that. But also the so-called good things, our light, our brilliance, our potential. And one way to look at potential is, again, to come back to that unicellular organism that we begin as, and it develops into these complex bodies that we all have. I mean, that's amazing. That's miraculous. Scientists still don't know how to do that. We all know how to do it because we've done it, but we don't consciously know how to do it. That potential is there. We may forget about it, when we are wounded, when we experience trauma, and we identify with that. That can become overwhelming. That can cloud our view and our memory so that we forget our true essence, which is more of our potential. When we come back to our potential, when we shine the light of awareness on the shadow, and we can then integrate it and come back to our wholeness, which is healing, we can again come back to our potential, and that supports our resilience. Such a big word these days, resilience, as our world is getting a bit out of hand. It's got its challenges. Resilience is really important. So who are we really, deeper than the traumas, the wounding, the history that we may identify with? And we may not even realize we're identifying with it. We're something very beautiful and light and wise, deeper than all that.
So we are coming from a universal perspective, and we're entering a world which happens to be the womb space that we start to form in, and that really becomes our world. From that space, the rippling of all of that prior, whether it's karma, cellular history, memory, and experiences that took place within the mother or through the mother, then come into this bigger world that echoes out into not only our own experiences to really heal and grow from that, but then creates the collective shadow of our world. There's this trajectory that's taking place that is the I, but it's also the we. So this feels like a multi-dimensional conversation, a multi-leveled conversation. Talk about the beginnings that are the point of light that become this huge force that becomes our collective world as well, and why the work you're doing is so important individually and collectively.
Oh, what a beautiful question. I love the way you put that. I really see this as multidimensional also. I feel like I want to start by just saying that often when I talk about pre and perinatal experience, people who happen to be parents start feeling really bad about themselves or get defensive. So I find it really important to clarify. I think everybody does their best. We do our best within the resources that we have, the degree of awareness that we have, the degree of healing that we've been able to do for ourselves, and the degree of support that we have. And we're designed to have support. In terms of what, source, where we come from, this larger field that we are part of and that we individuate within is a layer of support. There's a wonderful midwife, Mary Jackson, who also does pre and perinatal therapy type work, who talks about layers of support. That's part of our original blueprint. We're designed to have layers of support. So if you look at indigenous communities that haven't been touched very much, or hopefully at all, by modern Western culture, birth isn't an isolated event. A birthing mother is supported by her extended family, midwives, the community. That's part of our design, to have support. It happens at the level of the embryo also. When we're a very tiny little embryo, we're suspended within fluid sacs that connect us with the nourishment from the mother's blood. We have what the spiritual embryologist Jaap van der Wal calls the outer body of the embryo, which is the sacs that develop into the placenta. And we have the mother, All of these are layers of support. And then hopefully she has supportive people around her. So that's part of our original design or original blueprint. Source itself is a layer or layers of support. And in that, I'm influenced also by my experience with craniosacral biodynamics, hands-on energy work. It's evolved out of osteopathy, where we perceive different energetic fields that we can see as layers of support, that we are suspended within fields, within fields, within fields. And in that work, we sense and orient to very slow rhythms within these fields until we get to a place of what we call dynamic stillness. It's an alive and dynamic stillness. And my sense is that's where we come from. I have a sense of it extending out into the cosmos. If you think about the cosmos, stars, planets, suspended within space, there's a silence in space. There's a stillness. There is movement. It's alive and dynamic, but it's a stillness. And there's light within the darkness. And to me, that's our source. And little ones do that for us also. When you meet a newborn baby, almost all of us are totally delighted with that because it reminds us of that. They're so close to that. They're so resonant with that. Even when there's been trauma, they still resonate with that quite a bit.
I feel like this show is also a call to women in a new way. The Dalai Lama said that it is women that will change the world, and I've thought a lot about that statement. Many years ago, I embarked on a one-woman show road tour with the initial question that if there are men that are in their dominance and so wounded, and we women are fighting against that, have we looked at our part? Because we're the ones who rear them. And after going through that experience and the experiences that followed it, I came to the very answers of what happens to men and women in terms of how our society has evolved into a lot of wounding. And it did center back into what we as birthing mothers are carrying forward and not casting upon our babies, but unknowingly allowing them to marinate in that. And you have a very profound, simple idea within the book for anyone who is carrying a child. And that was simply speak to the child and say, this grief is not yours. Don't carry it. This anger is not yours. Don't carry it. It's mine. So you introduce this concept of helping that child that's growing inside to already stand in its wholeness, in its divine spark, in essence, even before it comes into the world, by taking responsibility for what is ours. And I don't know that women are in any way ever shown that or taught that or told that, because we don't think that we can really speak to our children from that point of view.
Yes, we aren't taught that in general. I have to say, I don't take credit for that approach. I learned that from my dear teacher, Ray Castellino, who developed a form of pre and perinatal work. And I had the great privilege and honor to work with him very closely for some years. What that is working with is what we call differentiation in pre and perinatal work. Babies aren't able to differentiate between what's theirs and what's someone else's in terms of emotion. They just take it on directly. They experience it directly in their bodies. So they don't have the brain capacity yet. Parts of the brain aren't developed yet to be able to say, oh, that's mom's feelings. That's not about me. They just experience it directly, and they don't have the whole story, the whole explanation for why she's or they are feeling the grief or the anger or whatever it is. They just experience it. And that becomes part of them. So that also becomes part of shadow. And it's so helpful if the mother or somebody else can just let them know, no, you don't have to worry about that. Mommy's taking care of that. That's mommy's doing this is mommy's. This isn't yours. Because the little one doesn't know that. It's true, they need to learn to speak after they're born, but babies are born understanding language. It's quite amazing how much they understand, and they recognize their mother's language as compared to foreign language. They prefer that. They're learning in the womb. They can understand. We don't quite understand how they understand, but they do. They can be incredibly relieved by that.
These layers in the womb before birth and the experiences after birth are interconnected to who we each are today. We need to pause and listen for the wisdom that can guide. We need to understand the impact that these things have in creating our collective experience. For a return to what we truly are, we must first return to innocence. Doing that requires sinking into the shadows, a walk back through the doorways and wormholes that made us who we are. This is from The Prenatal Shadow, Healing the Traumas Experienced Before and at Birth by Cherionna Menzam-Sills, birthingyourlife.org. Cherionna's upcoming events are The Prenatal Shadow, Being with the Book, a 6-week online course with the author to accompany your journey through the prenatal shadow, starting April 27, 2025. This is preceded by a free introductory online event, April 13, 2025. She will also be part of Mother of Medicine, the science and wisdom of the prenatal origins of health, as a co-host and presenter with Dr. Stephanie Mines and Dr. Antonella Sansone, a 3-day summit to support health. Return to life-giving natural indigenous wisdom. Heal the wounds from modern technocratic birth, November 7th through 9th, 2025. You can find out about this and other presentations that are taking place by going to birthingyourlife.org. We'll be right back after these messages.
Missions to Mars, driverless cars, AI chatbots. Feels like we're already living in the future. Well, Robinhood is built for the future of trading. Robinhood's intuitive design makes trading seamless. Spot opportunities and take control of your trades with tools like screeners, simulated returns, and strategy builder. On Robinhood, traders have access to hundreds of popular stocks and ETFs, 24 hours a day, 5 days a week, so you can keep up with today's fast-paced markets. You can now even trade stocks and crypto all in one place with the new desktop platform, Robinhood Legend. The future of trading is fast, powerful, and precise. Experience it now on Robinhood. Investing is risky. Robinhood Financial LLC, member SIPC, is a registered broker-dealer. Trading during extended hours involves additional risks. Cryptocurrency services are offered through an account with Robinhood Crypto LLC, NMLS ID 1702840. Robinhood Crypto is licensed to engage in virtual currency business activity by the New York State Department of Financial Services.
Time is precious, and so are our pets. So time with our pets is extra precious. That's why we started Dutch. Dutch provides 24/7 access to licensed vets, with unlimited virtual visits and follow-ups for up to 5 pets. You can message a vet at any time and schedule a video visit the same day. Our vets can even prescribe medication for many ailments, and shipping is always free. With Dutch, you'll get more time with your pets and year-round peace of mind when it comes to their vet care.
SIMRAN is an award-winning author, publisher of 1111 magazine, powerful speaker of wisdom, and a life mentor. Find out more at IamSimran.com. Now, back to 1111 Talk Radio.
I want to invite you to the 1111 Collective. You can go to 1111mag.com and register there to be informed about all the shows, the new 1111 magazine issues, and to keep in touch with everything that's happening for your own personal growth and evolution. You are not on a journey. You are the journey. This is from Cherionna Menzam-Sills' book, The Prenatal Shadow, birthingyourlife.org. We are a part of the collective, informed and formed in relation to our parents, family, community, culture, and planet. We inherit trauma as well as resilience from our ancestors. However, we learn early on, even in the womb, that it is not enough, not safe, not appropriate to fully embody this love. Over time, we forget. Our light, our love, moves into shadow. Today's discussion touches on the potential and resilience of babies before, during, and after birth, as sentient beings capable of healing their own trauma and the world.
A lot of what I do in the womb surround process workshops that I do, which are small, intimate workshops because little ones aren't designed to be with lots of people. They're designed to be with small families, their mother. So these are small workshops that are for adults where we address their little one experience. What we find is that often when people are implicitly remembering their experience in the womb, their experience as a little one, is that they become like a little one. They again aren't able to differentiate. So the nature of implicit memory is it feels like it's happening now. Little ones also don't differentiate between, oh, that was yesterday and this is now. Mummy wasn't here then, but she's here now. They can't differentiate. If they come back to the feelings of her not being there, then it's like that's happening now. So they need guidance to be able to differentiate. I'm so sorry that happened for you back then. That wasn't yours. Sometimes we ask the question, who before you might have felt that? And people know. Oh, that was my mother, or that was my father, or that was my great-great-great-grandparent who they never even knew, but somehow they have that information.
I love how in the book you provide so many stories that really bring forth these connections, the experiences that individuals end up in their lives where they're feeling dysfunction, where there are certain fears, where they're feeling certain emotions. You truly illustrate how it goes back to that prenatal or perinatal period and allows them to heal through some of the concepts that you and practices that you utilize. In addition to many wonderful questions that you ask at the end of each section for individuals to contemplate for themselves, you say, intuition and our ability to trust it are associated with the right cerebral hemisphere, which excels at perceiving wholeness and connectedness between all things, in contrast to the divisive dynamics that create shadow. And so with these experiences that are happening prenatal and perinatally, I would imagine that taking in those experiences that the mother's having or that is going on around us or the trauma that occurs within the birth process, that intuition and ability to trust gets worn down. And how we do have the ability to reclaim that, no matter how old we are or what stage of our life we get to, that we can go back.
Well, I think this is coming back to the feminine, and that's not just about women, but we all have feminine and masculine. And one aspect of the feminine is that it embraces the whole. It can perceive the whole and hold the whole, which is, in general, a right brain function. And that is active in babies. The left brain doesn't come online until later, when we start being able to speak and think of things in a more linear way, in a more masculine way. And I think you're right that when there's very early wounding, our direct access to our feminine, our intuitive knowing can be affected. So we don't trust it. We don't trust ourselves. We learn that it's safer to do or become what's expected of us. And babies are learning that even in the womb. For example, if there's violence in the family, let's say the father is violent, and so the mother is in fear, the baby experiences those fear hormones, doesn't differentiate between the mother's fear and their own fear, which is useful in this case because the baby is preparing to go into the mother's environment, which includes the violent father. So baby learns to contract like a cell, to withdraw away from that scary violence, which is probably what the mother's doing. So that becomes a way of being for that child, to basically live their lives in a way where they're shut down. When you're shut down, you don't feel your body as much. So you don't have the information coming to you of what's true for you. Then you have to depend on what you're hearing, what you're learning from the outside. It's hard to have integrity. It's hard to experience wholeness when you're shut down and cut off from such an important aspect of yourself, which is somatic body information and the intuition that's connected with that.
the 0 to 7 period of when we are growing, that we don't really have the emotional capacity. That part hasn't grown yet. Our intellectual ability has not grown yet. So everything is then taken into the body. It is all taken in to our cells and our tissues. You also go into the book about all of the different types of painful physical experiences that have taken place in birthing processes, some of which earlier on were just horrific, where babies didn't have anesthesia or not even thought to have consciousness, so surgeries were performed. Talk a little bit about somatics and how we then get back in touch with the body, because I would imagine that has people leave their bodies.
Absolutely. The first things that you're facing in life are overwhelmingly painful. You learn to cope. Usually, that coping, when we're overwhelmed, is we shut down, which includes dissociating from our bodies so we don't sense our bodies. That might make us extremely spiritual. We might be more connected to source because that's something that can still support us, whether we have a body or not. But in that case, very capable of really bringing what we know into grounded way of living and relating. Our modern world is very dissociative. It's starting to be recognized as being valuable, just as babies are starting to be recognized as being capable of feeling pain when they're undergoing an operation. I mean, imagine. You have to be very shut down to imagine that a baby doesn't feel anything. It's just so obvious.
PTSD and depression, mental health have become more and more in the forefront of people's awareness now. Do these early experiences, both those that are occurring in and with the mother, as well as those occurring with doctors and hospitals, are they contributing to some of this increase that we've been seeing, or is it simply that we're just more aware of these conditions?
Interesting. I mean, I think they're probably both true. But it seems to me that when someone has had very early trauma, like in the womb or at birth, and they already have PTSD that isn't recognized, then they're more vulnerable to future traumas. So they're more likely to react. And we know that babies in the womb, because they're learning about their mother's world in preparation to move into it, if their mother is experiencing extreme or chronic stress, those babies are born with altered cortisol levels, cortisol being a stress hormone. So they tend to have a different kind of reaction to stress and trauma that comes along in the future. They're much more sensitive to it. So they're more likely to experience PTSD because of their very early trauma. Becoming aware of the original source of the trauma, being able to go back gently, not diving back into it, but going back gently can help us to differentiate, to be freer of it. And I really emphasize that gently because somatic therapies and trauma therapies didn't used to be gentle. They used to be very often quite severe. And I know from personal experience, having gone through it, where there'd be a lot of catharsis, a lot of remembering, a lot of experiencing. For me, I could take a month to recover from that afterwards. I now know that I was in shock. It sent me into shock. Modern trauma therapies include orienting to what's resourcing, what's supportive for us, what's okay. A simple question like, what feels okay just now? What is supporting you, or what helped you get through that? When was the first time you knew you were okay after that event, whatever it was? Those kinds of things can help us to have enough resource in our system that then we can meet whatever the trauma memory is in a gentle way. Then we can integrate it. If we don't work in that way, we tend to just reinforce the trauma pathways in our nervous system, actually become more and more sensitive to trauma and stress and more reactive to it. If we're able to integrate it, we come back to wholeness. It doesn't have to be acting out in our shadow anymore.
I find that sometimes certain therapies or protocols almost lean more into over-processing, which then re-traumatizes an individual rather than promoting healing. So it's really important to be educated to find the appropriate practitioner and to also understand the various types of trauma that might be coming through. You go into physical traumas such as circumcision or use of forceps or cesarean section, but you also speak about certain things like racial bias, misogyny in healthcare, or some of the different ways that other things happen that create trauma in the mother and then subsequently create trauma in the child, or mortality rates increasing in certain types, Indigenous, Hispanic, and Black babies.
Well, yeah, that's part of the collective shadow, because people are just doing the things that they do without awareness. For example, there tend to be higher mortality levels for Black women giving birth, and also for Black babies. One of the problems is that there's a belief that these women are just complaining about having pain, but that they're not really in pain. And, that's just racist. A woman says she's in pain. She's in pain. We need to believe her. We need to have compassion, whatever she looks like. That's not going to be a one-time event for that woman, most likely, because she's living in a very racist society. So she's probably encountering discrimination all the time. I think some of that is coming out of shadow now, along with pre and perinatal awareness.
Again, you have so many beautiful stories in the book, and stories where the baby or the body actually brings forth the message that needs to come, which is just remarkable, like abuse or rape or incest that the mother may have experienced, and yet the baby is feeling neglected even though it's being carried in the womb. Talk a little bit about how there can be a disconnect that mother and baby are having from a prior experience, and then how that affects the growth and development and feeling of wholeness for the child that's coming.
I actually feel very sad, when I think about that even now. So if a woman has been raped, or if she had an abortion, which may have happened when she was much, much younger, and could have been because she was raped, or maybe she lost a baby due to miscarriage, the baby is marinating in her feelings about it, especially her unconscious feelings. So if she hasn't been able to process her emotions around whatever it was, they're still within her. And that's going to be affecting every cell in her body. And that's going to be affecting also her womb. It's probably going to affect her feelings, maybe not consciously, but on some level, about receiving new life in her womb. She may have feelings about having a feminine body. She may have feelings about having a body that is more visible because that becomes more vulnerable. If she has feelings of that kind, it is interpreted in the body as an ambivalence about the pregnancy. The baby experiences that as ambivalence about them, as a rejection. As I said, they're marinating in these difficult feelings. So there may be feelings of grief or anger or rage, terror, that the woman hasn't been able to process because she's never had a chance to talk about it. She's never had a chance to have therapy or to be with it. She doesn't know how to be with it. It's just overwhelming for her. She has PTSD. But the baby is marinating in that. And remember, they can't differentiate. So they become that. So then they might become melancholic, like I heard you say you were. I don't know. I have no idea why you were. I know I lived most of my life until I started doing this work being depressed. When I look back at it and I look at who my mother was, I had one of those violent fathers. My father was mentally ill. I think my mother lived in a lot of fear of him by the time I was coming along. She also hated gaining weight. And guess what happens when you're pregnant? Here I was, marinating in all of that, her fear. She tended to go into a freeze state where she was completely shut down. So I didn't feel like she was present for me. I never felt welcomed by her. And added to that was her being given general anesthesia, which she didn't want when I was born. Just that's what they did in the 50s. And so she was completely not present. So it actually took us 50 years to bond with a lot of hard work on my part. I lived most of my life being depressed until I started doing this kind of work. And I could identify what was going on, and I could work with my own feelings and also learn to work with the little one inside me. It is one of the key methods that I find incredibly helpful for healing on this level. So if we consider that we all have a little one, maybe many little ones inside us, and that little one still has all the needs that we had back then. So the little one needs to be loved. They need to be acknowledged. They need to be heard and seen, held and protected and spoken to. And we can do that. We can hold the little one within us. We can acknowledge them. We can reassure them. We can tell them, I'm so sorry that happened back then. And now we're safe. Look, we're here with this wonderful woman called SIMRAN, and we're safe here.
That belonging that I think so many individuals seek, that belonging that I looked for so long in my life, it needs to actually begin in the womb. And when it doesn't, when we have that disconnection or we feel neglected, then it causes problems. I have 2 sons, and if I look back at my pregnancies for both of them, I was a different woman because they were 9 years apart. And I think that plays a role because who we are at the time is what affects that specific child. And my first child, I didn't even know I was expecting until I was 6 months pregnant. And so I look back after reading your book and I go, wow, that child didn't even know they belonged for 6 months growing inside of me. That had to have affected him in some way. And so that belonging is something that I think we require or we keep seeking it. And then what can mothers do? What can families do? What can societies do from that personal place to support that child and themselves? While at the same time, we also know there's a bigger picture and the soul's contracted to create that experience.
Yes. Well, I'm sorry, first of all, for you and your son that it was like that. And maybe a first step for, probably already done this, but for parents is to acknowledge that you were doing the best you could. That's what you knew at the time. That's what you were capable of. And now you have other information. You can offer that to him. So it's never too late. I'm really sorry. I was just so unaware at that time. And I really want you to know I'm so happy you're here. Whatever it is you need to say that you might have needed to say back then, but didn't know it, that he needed to hear back then, but you didn't know it. You can say it now. And if they're at an age where they're not open to that kind of thing, or you can talk to them without talking to them verbally, spirit to spirit. Those communications work too. Tony Madrid has done work with hypnosis. Usually he would just work with the mother. Often the mother would have a child who had behavior problems or something like that. But he'd work with the mother, take them back to the birth and the time in the womb. First of all, look at how it was, and then go back and look at how they would have wanted it to be. They recreate it. And often the child who hasn't even been in the room with them is very different afterwards.
I do believe that type of work, because time really is all happening at once. And so if we're willing to do that work, we can go back and revisit those specific moments, alter the future by altering the past and deepening into the past in the present moment. So I love that you brought that up. Birth is a big experience. You provide individuals an understanding of their birth experience, whether it was cesarean, whether it was forceps, whether it was a natural birth, any type of traumatic experience, and how that then impacts them later on. For example, you talk about forceps and cesarean sections can affect an individual in terms of their timing.
Well, it's interesting. We find in pre and perinatal therapy that generally timing issues come from birth. Because when we're in the womb, we're not really exposed to time. Other people around us might be thinking about, oh, it's 5 months or whatever, this much time until the birth, but the baby isn't oriented to that. But babies are designed to initiate labor. Then they have their own way of finding their way through the birth canal. And there are times when that is overwhelmingly difficult, and medical interventions can be helpful, but that's a very tiny percentage of births. That the baby has their own sense of how to get through and how quickly to get through. So they follow their timing. And they're involved in a beautiful dance with their mother, where the womb contracts, the baby pushes against the contraction, and then the contractions relax and the baby relaxes. So they both have a pause when they can resource themselves. And then it happens again. So the contractions are rhythmic. It takes as much time as it needs to take for the mother and the baby to engage in that dance together and move through it in a way where they can listen to themselves and even enjoy the process. Women have been known to have orgasms during birth, so it can be enjoyable. And I have to believe that would be enjoyable for the baby too. So what can happen, and what happens far too often, is that someone thinks that the birth isn't happening fast enough. They get worried, often coming from their own birth trauma, by the way. It may be that there are signs that the baby's in danger, and it's decided that action needs to be taken. So the birth might be induced, and in that case, usually that happens with a synthetic form of oxytocin, which is meant to be the love hormone, which is involved in contractions. But synthetic oxytocin doesn't support bonding and attachment the way regular oxytocin does. It's not the love hormone. It stimulates uterine contractions, and it stimulates them without those pauses. So it's just one strong contraction after another, which can be exhausting for both mother and baby. So that can make the birth happen faster than either the mother or the baby is ready for. And babies who are born after induction tend to be speedy. When you're with them, you might feel like they're talking really fast and they get there quickly. Maybe they arrive early, or they're pushing to get something done. And you notice how I've sped up. It's like you feel like you need to take a breath when you're with someone like that because they can't slow down. Or it may happen that either the induction doesn't work or some other intervention doesn't work. They have to get the baby out of there as quickly as possible, and so they do an emergency cesarean section. And that completely interferes with the baby's timing and the mother's timing. The baby's path out of the womb is interrupted, and they're pulled out in a different direction. That can be very disorienting and shocking. It happens very quickly for the baby, a very quick change of environment, usually accompanied by a lot of stress hormones, sense of urgency and emergency. So again, someone born by cesarean, especially emergency cesarean, their sense of their own timing interfered with. They may not know how to complete things, how to get through a passageway, a transition in life. They may always feel like they need or expect someone to come in and help them, like happened at their birth. They may be in shock, or they may be not quite here, as if they're still anesthetized.
In the book, you ask people to go back through their birth story, and that whole section is quite powerful. In our healthcare system, unfortunately, it is a business, and so often inducing of labor or certain procedures are pressuringly recommended for many individuals. Yet you said that children will come out in their own time. So if that is past the 40 weeks, oftentimes the hospitals or doctors will push the mother to go ahead and induce. What is your recommendation on that? If the mother is healthy, if everything's going along, but it seems to be taking longer, how would you respond as a woman that's carrying a child in terms of being pressured into something?
Well, I come back to talking to the baby. And that can be challenging when, your authoritative doctor is telling you, this is dangerous, you got to get that baby out. But it doesn't have to be through surgical means or intervention. We know that when babies are in a breech position, they're coming foot first or bum first. Someone can talk to them and explain to them that they can turn around and it'll be easier. And they usually do. They can be very cooperative. If a baby knows if they take too much longer, that something is going to happen, they'll be very uncomfortable, and that'd be much easier if they just come. Often they just come. And as you say, they may have a different kind of life plan. Maybe there's some reason that they need that cesarean portal into life. At least if you talk to them, they can make that choice. So they don't have to be as traumatized by it. And going as slowly as possible. So things tend to speed up when there's fear. So labor often stops on the way to the hospital because an animal in the wild, if they're in the middle of giving birth and suddenly a saber-toothed tiger shows up and they have to run away, That's not the time to have a baby, so that labor stops until they're in a place of safety. The body needs to perceive safety in order for things to work. So bringing in more fear, it's like, you got to have this baby right away, or, is not supportive. What's supportive is, you know how to do this. Your baby knows how to do this. Let's let yourself be present and really support your baby, support yourself, let yourself be supported, having this baby the way you want to have this baby.
My greatest teachers have been my children. From the very first moment when I didn't know I was expecting, and it was already 6 months, even until today, when women become pregnant and they are carrying that being, that the invitation is really to them to become more present to their bodies, to become more present with the feelings and sensations that are running through them, to understand the wholeness that is growing inside of them is a reflection of their true self. And so to connect to that as a way to remember who they are. What do you feel is the primary message you really want individuals to get from this book? And how do you want them to use it in terms of our collective experience?
I see birth as a female initiation, very profound and powerful. My mission in life is to shine the light on what we hold in shadow, what we hold unconsciously that has so much power over us, to bring awareness to what our experience has been or what our children's experience has been. The first step in healing is awareness. Without awareness, we're not at choice. We just continue doing what we're doing through habit. We don't even consider doing anything different. But if we have awareness, we can start to look for alternatives. We can start to make choices. We can start to listen at a different level, listen to our bodies. I think our world today desperately needs that deeper listening, needs more light. It just seems to me efficient to start at the very beginning if we want to heal anything. So if we want our political leaders to be different in the future, we need to birth them differently. We need to welcome them right at the very beginning, let them know they're safe, they're coming into a world that can be safe, that they have something to offer, that they're a gift, and that we're going to support them and protect them and nurture them in their brilliance, in their original potential. And then they can embody that. So that goes for our future politicians and everybody else. You know, if we want peace on our planet, we need to begin at the beginning. Birth our babies in peace.
Cherionna's upcoming events are the Prenatal Shadow, Being with the Book, a 6-week online course with the author to accompany your journey through the prenatal shadow, starting April 27, 2025. This is preceded by a free introductory online event, April 13, 2025. She will also be part of Mother of Medicine, the science and wisdom of the prenatal origins of health, as a co-host and presenter with Dr. Stephanie Mines and Dr. Antonella Sansone, a 3-day summit to support health. Return to life-giving natural indigenous wisdom. Heal the wounds from modern technocratic birth, November 7th through 9th, 2025. You can find out about this and other presentations that are taking place by going to birthingyourlife.org. I want to invite you to the 1111 Collective. You can go to 1111mag.com and register there to be informed about all the shows, the new 1111 magazine issues, and to keep in touch with everything that's happening for your own personal growth and evolution. 1111 is devoted to the journey of your soul. Visit 1111mag.com and join the 1111 Collective. I look forward to being in relationship with you there. Dr. Cherionna Menzam-Sills is a somatic pre- and perinatal therapist, Continuum somatic inquiry teacher, and biodynamic craniosacral therapist with a doctorate in prenatal and perinatal psychology. Informed by extensive study with perinatal pioneers William R. Emerson and Ray Castellino and Continuum founder Emilie Conrad, Menzam-Sills has taught internationally, often with her husband, Biodynamics pioneer Franklyn Sills, the author of The Breath of Life and Spirit into Form. She lives in Devon, UK. Thank you for being on the show. Until next week, In love, of love, with love and as love, I am SIMRAN. Be well.
Thank you for opening your mind to a new reality, your heart to greater compassion, and your experience of aliveness with 1111 Talk Radio. Join host SIMRAN next Tuesday at 8 a.m. Pacific, 11 a.m. Eastern Time to step through the gateway of conscious living. You are not on the journey. You are the journey.
Time is precious, and so are our pets. So time with our pets is extra precious. That's why we started Dutch. Dutch provides 24/7 access to licensed vets, with unlimited virtual visits and follow-ups for up to 5 pets. You can message a vet at any time and schedule a video visit the same day. Our vets can even prescribe medication for many ailments, and shipping is always free. With Dutch, you'll get more time with your pets and year-round peace of mind when it comes to their vet care.
All you homeowners have unique needs. Some feel the need to leave up holiday decorations year-round. Others have the need to use their garage as practice space for their new metal band. And because each homeowner has unique needs, Geico helps you get the right coverage for your home and what's in it. That way, you get exactly what's right for you, even if your needs are unique. Get more with Geico.